Hi there, it's Marzena. I know it's a little bit late for a Valentine's video, but this project was a big one, so it took a while. Few months ago, Telle from Dollies reached out to me again, this time to invite me to join her and Sarah from DiamondzaCraft in their Valentines collaboration. They called it Creepily Lovesick. Sounds like something straight down my alley, right? So I couldn't say no. We had a little delay with our launch, but finally here we are. So let's dive into my first ever collaboration video. I had this concept in my head for some time to make a beautiful woman, a baroness or a priestess, sitting on a throne and holding her lover's head in her hands. For my cruel mistress, I chose Nefera, because of her more feminine body type. For my poor boy, I will only need a head, so I picked the only incomplete male doll that I have. Let's give him more to worry about than just one missing hand and wobbly legs. I will speed up the preparation process because with 2 face-ups and a big stand, there will be a lot to cover. So quickly. Cut the hair, heat up the head, remove the head from the neck, remove the hair plugs, wipe off the factory paint with acetone. After that, I could finally submerge both heads in an acetone and water solution to shrink them. After 2 days of soaking, 2 days of drying, and then again 2 days of soaking and 2 days of drying, they looked like this. Not a huge change, but still worth the time. The scalp on a female head I painted with acrylics to prepare it for the reroot. Neferas and Cleos are not my favorite face sculpts, especially their weird nose bridges, so I tried to make it look more natural. One head ready for the reroot. Time for our male head. I wanted my dude to be a regular dude, so first I cut off the wolf's ears. Then he needed a pair of human ears to replace them. The head from a DC superhero girl, whose body I used for my Andariel, will be perfect for ear transplant donor. I also cut off some parts of her scalp to cover the holes that remain on my dude after cutting the ears off. I shaped the pieces and covered the holes, along with gluing the new ears on. Then I smoothed the scalp with micromotor and nail buffer. I didn't want our guy to go down without a fight, so I had to rough him up. I started painting his scalp with acrylics, but then I decided that I want some parts of the skin to be visible through the hair, so I wiped the paint off. After that, they both were ready for the reroot. I didn't record that because it is something that you do in front of a TV or during a break at work. During the process, I decided to change my concept from baroness or priestess to a succubus. So I left some bald spots for future horns. I tried not to pluck too many strands of hair, but it still ended up fuller than I wanted, so I removed some of them. After that, I poked one hole in each bald spot and glued in the bendable wire for the horn's reinforcement. To secure the new hair from the inside, I squeezed in a good amount of high-tech glue through the neck hole and spreaded it with a Q-tip. The glue dried overnight and the head was ready to get back on the body. So I trimmed the neck peg, and because the neck itself was a little bit cracked, I fixed it with a tiny drop of super glue. But to be sure that it won't crack during pushing it into the head, I heated up the head first using a hairdryer. Those few more days after the head shrinking gave the acetone time to evaporate completely, and the difference is now very well visible. Time to turn her into a cozy burrito. And spray with 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear Sealant to create a good surface for the repaint. So here my problems with this doll have begun. I tried to emphasize her golden skin color, but I quickly noticed that it won't be the best fit for her chestnut hair. I chose this hair color when I still wanted to do a real woman with natural hair color, and I already worked with black, blonde and red. I didn't think about her skin tone back then. Big mistake. I wiped my blushing off and decided that while it's already wiped, I will try some face modifications. To be honest, I was all over the place with this doll, mostly because I felt intimidated by Sarah and Telle's progress photos. They did such a wonderful sculpting job. I didn't want my doll to be the boring one. I decided to try a lip-biting expression, so I modified her mouth a little. After that, I sculpted teeny tiny fangs and some bony structures on her forehead and cheeks. For that, I used epoxy sculpt. Eventually, I ended up repositioning the structures on her forehead. I had some time to think, and I came to the conclusion that the style that would suit the hair perfectly would be the one inspired by Louis' royal paintings. In fact, the concept of a lady on a throne was heavily inspired by one of his paintings. Unfortunately for me, that means another skin color change. I'm always trying to avoid covering faces with paint, so changing a skin color is never an easy task. Noted: Grey pan pastel is not your friend. After dozen layers of MSC and wiping everything off with acetone a few times, I managed to give her a paler complexion. So, as I said, this project didn't have a pre-made sketch, neither on paper nor in my head. I don't usually work like that. I like to be prepared and think every step through before I even start. With this one, I only knew few things. Beautiful woman with her lover's head sitting on a throne. But how should they look? What pose should I give her? How should the throne be made? I don't know. So I just jumped right into a huge improvisation. Because I didn't have a clear vision, the concept shifted a bit. As I said before, I was also highly intimidated by Sarah's and Telle's progress photos. I felt that I'm definitely the weakest sculptor of the three of us, so I was trying to push myself further on the details. Which at the end didn't end up bad, I guess. This is why it is good to work with others, sharing your progress with them. Sometimes your work can inspire someone to try harder. Sometimes you can be inspired by them. And if you are feeling intimidated by someone else's skill level, there's nothing wrong with it. It is fine as long as it don't make you feel discouraged, but totally opposite to that. To finish the face, I added some markings on it. First, I sketched them with a white pencil and then topped them with white acrylic paint. This one's once again inspired by Luis Royo and his paintings. I glossed her eyes and lips and could finally release her from her burrito stage. Did I hurt her with this transformation? I don't think so. Let's make some horns. I decided not to sculpt them straight on her head, but do it separately and just glue them on. Fully cured, painted and sealed with varnish. So first I trimmed down the wires and measured how thick the horn's bases should be. Then I sculpted them with epoxy and after it cured, I added some more rough texture to it. Then I painted them with a creamy base color and used wash technique with brown. Before I could start with the body, I needed to have a throne, to pick the best pose. It was supposed to be made of stone, so I printed a few skulls for decorations. Then I changed the concept and decided to make the whole throne from skulls and bones. I prepared the base pieces from XPS styrofoam and I covered them with Worbla. Most of the throne I made off camera, because once again I didn't have a plan and I just went with the flow with super glue. After a few hours of hysterical laughter and repeating to myself that I am a normal person, I ended up with this. And these are all the bones I was left with. I painted the throne using watered down brown acrylics and wash technique. From XPS scraps, I cut out bigger and smaller pieces that I glued to the stand as some rock formations. Covered them with 3 layers of Vicol glue to harden them a bit, and then I painted the whole base with black and grey acrylics. I filled the cracks with red, orange and yellow to imitate lava. It was finally time for some bodywork. I secured the repainted face first. Then I cut off one of the doll's legs to reposition it later. I cut the torso with my cutting blade. I wanted her butt to be pushed back even more for a look as sexy as possible. I smoothed the rough edges and removed the plastic seams, factory numbers, and plastic panties from the body. I also prepared the cut-off leg for repositioning. With a thick wire and a buttload of hot glue, I reattached her torso pieces. Don't be me. Please wait for the glue to cool down in one piece before putting it in the second one. No! Yeah, that was tricky. No! If you got a drop of glue on your hand, don't try to wipe it off with your other hand. One burnt hand is better than 2. After the glue dried, I could cover the gap with epoxy sculpt. With a bit of water, I tried to make the transition as smooth as possible. I didn't plan it, but I was left with the perfect amount of epoxy for the boob job. Today is your lucky day, lady. When the epoxy cured, I connected the leg pieces together with wire and superglue. I glued the doll in her final pose, but because superglue was not sufficient to hold her hip, I also used UV resin here. A lot of UV resin. With a nail buffer, I sanded down the epoxy surface and smoothed the transition even better. I covered the rest of the joints, and I also gave my girl a bit bigger booty. After a few hours, when the epoxy was still curing but it was hard enough to be safe from damage, I sculpted her feet. First, I needed to get rid of the toes on the bent leg. Then I could sculpt her demonic feet more accurately to her pose. After this part cured, I gave it a good sanding. Here I'm drilling holes for the tail and wings attachments. The wings I made from wire, warbler, and epoxy on top. With a small scrap of sandpaper, I smoothed the transition between warbler and the cured epoxy. I bent a wire for the tail, positioning it properly on the doll, and I covered this wire with epoxy. At some point it lost its shape, but I reshaped it before it cured. I glued the finished pieces in her back and butt hole, and covered the connections with even more epoxy. On the next day, using a nail buffer and a sandpaper, I sanded down not only the last part of epoxy, but all the epoxy parts. I wanted the transition to be as smooth as possible. When she was smooth enough, I covered her with 3 coats of light skin colored acrylic and 2 coats of Mistress Super Clear to prepare her for shading and blushing. I don't know what to say. This is the second doll in a row that I dropped on the floor during spraying. This time the leg and the tail cracked. But I was too tired even to be mad at that point. Needed to fix it quickly with Liquitex varnish and the super glue. And after that I could start working with pastels, cause her body looked pretty flat at the moment. With regular soft and pan pastels, I added more shades to make the skin look more 3D and more natural. This is not my favorite part of doll customizing process, but it is necessary, especially if you are a creep like me and don't make clothes for your dolls. The membrane of the wings I painted and shaded with brown acrylics. I wanted them to somehow match my girl's hair. Off camera, I used white ballpoint pen to cover her boobs and the rest of her body with body paint. A little bit of blood, cause I wouldn't be myself. Okay, so her boobs are covered, more or less. Checked. Time for her lady parts. I could either create them or cover them. I didn't like any of those options, but we know which one YouTube would like. So I spent few long hours working with freakishly tiny chains and made a pair of very comfy and practical panties. My old earring, rest in pieces. Yes, her body's still kinda showing, but I did what I could, okay? I think succubuses are just like that, you know? Damn exhibitionists. Anyway, it was time to unwrap her head. I cut through the plastic wrap very carefully, but I still managed to cut off her hair. On the front. Okay, it's official. This project is cursed, but it was okay. I was fine. Everything was fine. I made 2 thin braids to somehow cover the fact that one portion of her hair was 5 times shorter than the rest. And it even worked. I added some tiny bits because more details. Before I could continue with the hairstyle, I needed to attach the horns. After that, I made a French braid. At least I tried. I was always a lousy hairdresser. I showed my doll to my husband and all he said was, "Where are her nipples?" I wanted to be good, I swear. But I did ended up creating them with UV resin. Of course, we don't want to make YouTube angry, so they will be still covered with the body paint. I just wanted an accurate shape. To finish this doll, I only needed to fix the imperfection on her neck and glue her to her throne. Wait, I still need to make the male head. I wanted his hairstyle to lay as flat as possible, so I left a huge part of his head bald. He already had some scars, but I gave him some more. Secured his hair and matched the color of his new ears with the rest of his face. Claude already has a nice natural looking skin tone, so I could go straight to blushing and shading. This was my first ever male repaint, so I was both excited and a little bit anxious. But despite the brows, I am terrible at brows and eyelashes, it was a pretty pleasant process. He quickly started to look really good, handsome even. I can see that my repainting skills are not top-notch. There's still tons of stuff to improve on, but it was fun and I was happy with the process and with the outcome. I even feel a little bit sorry for this poor dude. What do you think? Should I make a full figurine of him before he fell a victim to our devilish beauty? Like a demon slayer or something? Of course, we would know how he will end up, but he wouldn't have to. I still have 1 or 2 cloths in my creepy box, so let me know if you think it's a good idea. I glossed his eyes, wounds and blood streaks and only the inner part of his mouth, not the lips. He is ready to join his mistress. I fixed their hairstyles with a hairspray. As a final detail, I added some blood drops with a hot glue that I painted red. And my first ever collab project was finished. Before I show you the final footage and pics, I just wanted to thank Telle for inviting me to this amazing collaboration. Be sure to check out the other videos. I can't wait to watch them myself, cause those dolls are incredible. The links to Telle's and Sarah's entries will be in my description box. Okay, here is my cute couple. Despite the fact that her butt is showing a little bit, or maybe because of that, wink wink, I really like how this figurine turned out. I was really scared that it will end up like my Homer doll, with a huge stand and really simple doll that will blend in and be just like an accessory to her own stand. But because I went all in with the Succubus concept, I think she sticks out pretty well. I'm in love in my first ever dude face up. He is damn handsome. I feel sorry for him even. I also really like the bone throne. It is not as big as I anticipated, but it still looks cool. And how do you like my first ever collab entry? Do you think it fits in a Creepily Lovesick theme? Is it too gory, or is it not gory enough? I really hope that you like it. If you do, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel with a bell if you are curious of what I'm gonna do next. Thank you guys for watching and see you soon!